Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Well, after the extraordinary events that have shaken Egypt over the last few weeks, I have the pleasure of meeting today with an Egyptian writer and journalist and author of a book called Taxi, a series of conversations with taxi drivers in Cairo, published a couple of years ago. The conversations go back a few more years. I'm speaking, of course, of Khaled Al Khamissi. Thanks very much indeed for being with us.
Thank you.
This extraordinary book, Taxi, published well before the events that we've all been following so closely for the last few weeks, a series of conversations in 2005, 2006 with taxi drivers in the streets of Cairo, in which one senses already all the things that were making life so difficult, all the elements that were to lead to this extraordinary revolution that we've witnessed these last few weeks.
Look, 2005, it was a turning point year. It was the year of the election, parliament election, then presidential election. And during these two elections, we felt in that time that really we live in an end of a period, the end of Mubarak period. During this year, has no legitimacy at all. People felt that finally he will fall. At that year, 2005, began a real demonstrations in many cities of Egypt. And 2006, these demonstrations continue. And we felt finally we will have our revolution. I was opposite to Mubarak from 81. Then 30 years ago, I was in the streets against him. And he is a man who make a total fail from the first second, from his first speech. We knew that he cannot be president. And we are a very patient society and very peaceful population. And we wait for 30 years.
It's a long wait,
yes,
as you say.
Yes.
And of course, you had been out in the streets. You mentioned these demonstrations, 2005, 2006, this movement, Kifaya, the Enough movement.
Enough or Kifaya movement, it was 2004. But 2005, it was not Kifaya, really. It was beginning by students in universities and in the factories. And it was the real boom of the manifestation began from the factories in Mahalla and in Kafr al-Dawar.
So working people.
Working people in these factories.
But people,
it's huge factories.
People who were working people who were taking to the streets in a very repressive regime with a very strong system of security forces and policemen and plainclothes policemen and a great deal of fear. It was a regime, as often are authoritarian regimes, based on fear. These demonstrations, nonetheless, but suddenly, on the 25th of January, something else happened. Something that, as it took shape in Tahrir Square, looked more and more over the succession of those 18 days, not like an ordinary demonstration, but like something that couldn't go back, something that had to win. With this extraordinary realization that the people had the strength, you were there. What had changed? What was the spark that led to what we saw in January and February?
Look, it's really difficult to say what happened. But what happened, it's supposed to happen. Then it was a very logical thing that it happens finally. What I can say that Egypt is a very young population. 2/3 of population is under 27 years old. You can imagine almost 70% of the population are under 30 years. This youth, this 70% of population, is totally different than my generation. They are not based, but they are totally, their inputs are from internet, from TV channel, satellite channel. They are the system of brain is different. I think this youth, this 70% of population, make the difference.
And there was in Tahrir Square this sense of growing strength, this growing confidence, this sense that we're not going to go, he's going to go before we do, but also this surprise that actually the people had this extraordinary strength. There was this magical solidarity and atmosphere in Tahrir Square. Did you find it so as well?
I find it so, yes, exactly. I think we live in a moment where long time ago we speak about Egyptian civilization, that we are a country of thousands and thousands of years of civilization. We are one of the oldest countries in the world. We are a country with the same frontier from 7,000 years ago. But all that was totally theoretical, with all the ugliness we had and with all the stupidity we have in our country. Where is this civilization? Where is this 7,000 years ago? I didn't feel it, never. And finally, we feel it, we touch it, we saw it. We saw this real civilization in Tahrir Square, but in also every city in Egypt. We felt that this wisdom, that this thousands of years of wisdom is here, finally. And this is make the difference, I think.
And beyond the strength of what was going on in Tahrir Square, the nature of it was something that was very difficult to understand for the West. It took the West an awful long time to understand what was actually happening and the strength of it and the beauty of it. And at first there were all kinds of fears and prejudices. I think it betrayed a lot of our own ignorance, a lot of talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, a lot of talk about the chaos that would ensue. And actually, little by little, we began to wake up to the fact that something quite extraordinary was happening in Tahrir Square. What do you think it tells us about the gap between
I have an objection before I hear
Please, your objection first.
My objection is Tahrir Square, because it was not in Tahrir Square. The media was in Tahrir Square, but the Egyptian population was everywhere. Was in Suez, was in Arish, was in Alexandria, was in Tanta, Damanhur, Matruh, Asyut, everywhere.
And with that same extraordinary atmosphere, that same feeling, that same sense of power.
Yes, exactly. Then I will hear now your question. After my
objection is over.
Thank you.
So these extraordinary movements, and you're quite right, all around Egypt,
yes.
At different points in different cities, and on that last Friday, suddenly it seemed to be everywhere. They were in all the streets. There was more protesters, it seemed, than non-protesters in the streets of Egypt. Why do you think we had such trouble at first understanding what was coming from the streets of Egypt? Why did the rest of the world not understand in those first few days what was happening?
Because the European media, the American media, didn't want to make a real image about our societies. I think what happened, it was written in literature. If people, European people, American people, read our literature from 20 and 30 years ago, they 100% were understand what happened in Egypt. But unfortunately, people, European people, American people, etc., all the world depend on European American press. And these people didn't know really our societies. They speak a lot from 5-6 years ago about the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt is falling down 5 years ago. These 70% of youth population didn't really accept a religious state, didn't accept it. And they continue to say Muslim Brotherhood. And in Tahrir Square, in Suez, in everywhere, we didn't find any Muslim Brotherhood except maybe 2%, 3%. We say many times we need a civil government, a secular government. And I think the problem is lack of reading literature.
Well, perhaps your book, Taxi, will go some way to bridging that gap. Those conversations happened in 2005, 2006. Were you to write another book with conversations of taxi drivers in Cairo today, would the mood be terribly different?
Terribly different, no. I think taxi drivers, they are from the people who live under the line of poverty, $2 per day. And I think these people in Egypt are more wise than I am. And wise people will say, we will wait and see. We will wait a little bit. We cannot be a part of a brilliant thing for 1 month. We have to wait. And I think if I go now, they will tell me, wait and see, don't be a stupid cultural person.
Be a more sensible, down-to-earth person.
I am against them. I'm really confident of tomorrow.
Khaled Al Khamissi, thank you so much. Thank you very much for having been our guest on today's interview.
Thank you.
Thanks very much to you for having been with us. We'll be back very shortly for another interview here on France 24. Do stay with us.